Well, you are listening to Meeting House here on Faith Radio, and it is great to welcome to the program Danny Ray. One would say that Danny is an illusionist. Others would say he is a magician. I don't know if you're a musician or not, but
No.
you are someone that has been involved in a national reality show, venues around the world, the famed Magic Castle in Los Angeles, and also an author, brand new book out called No, I Can't Make Your Wife Disappear, A Magician's Guide to a Magical Marriage. Just saying that title, Danny, makes me laugh. I love it. That's good.
I'm glad it makes you laugh. It made me laugh coming up with it.
Oh, that is great. So Danny Ray joining us today here on the Meeting House from his home in California. And for someone who is a believer in Christ, who's also an illusionist, a magician, if you will, give us an idea about how those worlds converged for you.
Yeah, so I didn't grow up in the church. I started doing magic or sleight of hand when I was about 10 years old and came to faith in Christ when I was 17 years old. And at 17, I started reading through the Bible for the first time, and I read, magicians are going to hell. And I was like, oh, that's not good for the home team. So by God's grace, had a lot of pastors, mentors in my life that were able to speak truth into me, that what was going on in the New Testament, Old Testament with, the calling up of spirits and witchcraft and different stuff, that I'm like, I do some card tricks. They're like, no, that's different from what was going on then. And so I continued on that path, ended up, doing that professionally for a number of years through college, like part-time in seminary, kind of put that on the back burner, and then got involved in youth ministry as a pastor at my local church, and then eventually started this ministry. Yeah.
So tell me just a bit about the nature of the ministry that God's given to you currently.
Yeah, so we've traveled all 50 states, 21 countries, and just have this opportunity to share God's transforming message through captivating illusions. And I think it's like any missionary, you're trying to figure out what does the culture have in common with what you do? In this case, sleight of hand is a huge buzz in the culture. And then how can I figure out a creative way to communicate the gospel in that context? And so over the last 18, 19 years, I've been able to do shows where I do a message, and oftentimes I'm coming in as like a keynote speaker, and the magic is coupled with that as well. But I try to blend the magic and the message so that it's compelling for even if there's an atheist in the room, so that's my goal, is just trying to figure out compelling ways of sharing the gospel.
And there are, I guess when someone thinks about the world of illusion or the world of magic, I know that you've performed, I believe, with Penn and Teller. You've got people out there like David Copperfield that do all these grand illusions. And I'm trying to think of the guy that jumped off the building.
David Blaine.
And was it him that did that froze himself in the block of ice and so you got the people that do the grand illusions and things of that sort. You got people that do card tricks and saw people in half and things of that sort and make things disappear. Where would you come down along that whole spectrum?
Yeah, so I can't, like, my specialty is close-up magic. So cards, coins, rubber bands, cup and ball. But over the years, I've incorporated a lot of escapes into my show as well. So I've done underwater escapes, straight jacket, buried alive, not frozen. Though I've gotten some really cold water for some of the underwater escapes. But and I did a hangman's noose, a Russian roulette. Currently in my show, I play Russian roulette with my eyeball, which is, fun. But all of those to me are about, I don't look at the illusions as like, oh, what do I want to enjoy? I try to figure out how can I create something that's going to create astonishment and wonder, and then point that back to who God is. So that's kind of my angle, as I'm trying to figure out what's the best to connect with people, not necessarily what I enjoy the best.
So, how does doing a Houdini-esque underwater escape, how does that comport with the gospel message?
Yeah, so the way I would start that one out when I was doing that piece is I would say, I'm going to go underwater and I want you to hold your breath with me. And if at any point you let out your air, I want you to think about this question: where are you going to be when you take your last breath? And then I would go underwater and do the whole piece. But then afterwards, I'm able to talk to them like, hey, we all have on our tombstone, we'll have the day we were born, a dash, and the day we died. But that dash represents our life. What's your life going to represent? What are you going to be about? And that gave the opportunity to share the gospel with a lot of people through that illusion, through that escape.
Danny Ray is joining us today here on the Meeting House on Faith Radio. He's an illusionist, a magician, if you will. He has written a book called No, I Can't Make Your Wife Disappear, subtitled A Magician's Guide to a Magical Marriage. Already established. That is an incredible title. So what inspired you to write this?
Yeah, my wife and I just celebrated 25 years. And
congratulations.
Thank you. As part of that journey, we began to think about how can we give back. We've been to a lot of marriage conferences. I've been a part of a lot of those. I've read a lot of marriage books over time, and my wife has as well. And we'll talk about, the strategies in there and practical tips that we could use in our marriage. And so as we came toward our 25th, it was like, what would it look like to give back? And so for about 2 years, we just collected all the different ideas that we've learned, and then we started to put those into a book format. But when people come to my show, usually they're interested in the magic first, in Jesus second, is usually the order. Not always. For people who know me better, they want to hear those messages and how I'm going to kind of inspire, encourage, empower them to be the person that God's designed them to be. But with the book, we thought we need to start with that same approach with what's the overlap between sleight of hand and with biblical principles for marriage. And so we found numerous of those, 18 to be exact. And
wow.
For example, misdirection, right? Magicians fake left, go right, and everybody thinks it's about focusing on the wrong thing, but a magician actually gets you to focus on the right things so you could experience astonishment and be in that state of wonder, which is really rare in our culture. But the same is true in our marriages. When we focus on the right things, the things that God's purpose for our marriage, we're going to experience more wonder, joy. Yeah. So, and then we talk about mind reading, how to read your spouse's mind, and talk about the principles for that. We talk about how do you thrive in your marriage with standing ovation, right? When you think about a magician or a performer getting a standing ovation, they've thought that through. They're thinking about the end before they think about the first trick. And so in our marriages, what's it look like to look at the end, and where do we want to end up in terms of our marriage, and how do we start today that leads in a direction that leads to that fulfillment?
Well, I understand it in the book, you actually have 3 different sections. One is secrets to communicating effectively. Then there's secrets to overcoming the impossible, and secrets to thriving in marriage. I know you've touched on some of that material already, but to take us through that outline or that structure of the book and what you wanted to get across.
Yeah, it is. My wife and I've done as a pastor, you end up doing a lot of marriage counseling, both premarital and marital counseling. And so over the years, one of the number one questions that we get is how can we communicate better? And so we really wanted to start the book out with that. I think it's a huge need in a relationship is how do we communicate effectively? How do we do this better? And then with that comes a lot of questions in the bedroom and sexual intimacy. But really, and that's chapter 6, we deal with creating mind-blowing bedroom magic, right? But sometimes people will come to us and start there, but we have to start at the beginning. It's been said that sex starts in the kitchen, right? Is when you're serving well, you're communicating well outside of the bedroom, that's going to lead to better intimacy in the bedroom. So that first section is all about communication. And then we've seen with ourselves and other couples and different stuff we've read is marriage is full of struggle and pain and heartache and things that you will need to overcome. When I lost my father, that was a devastating time. When my wife and I went through a miscarriage, it was heartbreaking. And how do we move forward? How do we overcome? How do we not attack each other when we're hurt and in a bunch of pain? And so thankfully, through some wise counsel and through some people, coming alongside us, we learn to overcome. And so we talk about how do you overcome in that section. And then the last one's all about thriving, is how do we thrive in our marriage and just enjoy. And for us, the secret is grace and forgiveness. There's got to be the more time you spend with somebody, the more grace you're going to need to give them. I can't back out of my driveway without my wife going like, hey, watch out babe, I know the fire hydrant's there. I know it, but we have to show grace and forgiveness continually, which helps to create a thriving marriage.
Well, you are listening to Meeting House here on Faith Radio. Danny Ray is joining us today. He is not only an illusionist, he's also a pastor, full-time youth pastor for more than 10 years, and continues to work and partner with local churches and ministries around the country. He has written this book called No, I Can't Make Your Wife Disappear. And let's talk, you mentioned something earlier that was rather intriguing to me. You talked about sleight of hand.
Yes.
And misdirection. And the thought that occurred to me as you were sharing about that is how honesty is such a strong component of a marriage that thrives. Because if we try to keep secrets from one another, if we're not honest and transparent with one another, I don't think we can really walk in what God has called us to have in our marriage. So draw the line, if you would, or connect the dots, as I like to say, between this whole area that you talk about as far as misdirection and the importance of really, as you said earlier, keeping the focus on the right things. And I would imagine that involves being honest with each other and transparent.
Yeah. So I think it's chapter 2. Chapter 2, yeah, secrets kill. I had to double check. Secrets kill.
All right, it's verified now. Fact check. Chapter 2. All right.
So, I have a lot of secrets as a magician, but in my marriage, I don't have any secrets from my wife. And I know for some people that just seems like absolutely impossible. How can you possibly share everything with your wife? Well, for us, trust is, and for any relationship, trust is foundational. And when there's secrets or there's hidden agendas or there's things that you're hiding or things you're afraid to share, those things end up like becoming a source of pain in the marriage. So let me give you an example. When somebody is struggling with pornography, right? And they're like, okay, I'm going to keep that a secret from my wife or from my husband, either way. The reality is, over time, you start to create this secret life, and with any type of addiction, that secret becomes more, and maybe you explore other areas, and that could lead to areas that you never dreamt you would go. Instead of going to your wife or your husband and saying, you know what, I've really been struggling in this area, and together with them, you could come up with a solution to bring healing and hope into that situation, instead of living alone and trying to secretly deal with it yourself. There's a pattern that happens where we feel like we could confess to God, and we go to God and go like, God, I'll never do this again. But then we go back and do the same things again. But it's in the confession to other brothers and sisters or to our spouse that it can really bring healing and hope into that situation. But that's true of it could be with money. There's a lot of different ways that we could hide or have secrets from our spouse. But the most effective thing is to be honest. But with honesty, there's a risk. It doesn't always go well. And we've been a part of those things where, openly admitting something can really blow up a marriage and really hurt a marriage. But it's the secrets our belief is that the secrets will hurt it more in the long run than dealing with what is in moving forward. And so we always say, do whatever it takes to create a great marriage. If that means being embarrassed, if that means humbling yourself, that means going to counseling, that means seeing a pastor, that means talking to somebody, do whatever it takes to have a great marriage.
Danny Ray joining us today here on the Meeting House on Faith Radio. No, I can't make your wife disappear. You're in pastoral counseling. As you mentioned, you counsel a number of people you have throughout the years. Obviously, there are those that have made that decision that they want to see their spouse disappear. They want to separate from their spouse. They want to end their marriage. And what have you found to be perhaps one of the biggest keys to making sure that couples thrive in their marriage in Christ, and they don't think that they would want to see their spouse disappear or in their marriage, in other words?
That is, it's painful when you, and if you're in that situation where you're thinking this is it, is God's in the business of fixing what appears to us to be impossible. And he loves bringing healing and hope into desperate situations. So even though things might feel completely hopeless, with God, there is a way out. And I'm not talking about if you're being abused or like there are biblical reasons to get out. But if it's just like, quote unquote, I've fallen out of love, or, he's just different or she's different than she used to be. There are ways that you can bring love back into the relationship. Mm-hmm. But I do think it's back to some of the things we've talked about. It requires forgiveness. A lot of times there's things that we just feel like we can't forgive, something that he or she's done. And you need to walk through, how do you forgive? How do you reconcile? How do you give grace, to love our spouse as well that way? And then the other thing that we mentioned already is communicating in a way that your spouse hears you. Is oftentimes the reason you want to go separate ways is you feel like your spouse doesn't understand you. And so we talk about in this book of how do you learn to understand your spouse from their perspective, not from yours. And there's a great book on this called The 5 Love Languages, highly recommend it, that deals specifically with learning to understand how your spouse receives love the best. And that will help you to speak to them in a way that they feel loved.
All right, Danny, we have a video only feature now as we wrap up. Not to put you on the spot, but I think that I would be shortchanging you and those that may be watching the video here by not asking you. I don't know if you've got a deck of cards there handy, or look at that. So if you could maybe do a display of your craft for us as we conclude.
Yes, I would love to do that. But Bob, let me say this. I'm going to do something that's for you.
For me.
For you. And anybody watching will be able to see the trick I do for you.
You're going to make me disappear. There we go.
But you have to let them know, like, we haven't set anything up, right? There's nothing like you and I've done in advance where I told you anything.
Absolutely. And besides, we're 3,000 miles apart. So
in a moment, you're going to wonder, I'm going to change cameras. And then I'm going to do a little picture in picture here. So you could see, this is my prediction. I'm going to put my prediction here. I'll put the book on top of the prediction. And there's nobody else. You're going to have to trust me, but there's nobody else in this room with me. I'm in a studio on my own with a camera switcher clicking back and forth. So here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the cards, and whenever you want, I want you to just say, stop, Bob. You know what? Actually, Bob, let's do this different. Instead of saying stop, think of a word. It doesn't matter, any word you want. Do you have a word?
Okay. I do.
Okay. So as I go through, say that word, and I'll stop right there.
Okay. Happy.
Happy. Okay. Can you see that card?
I can.
Okay, so I'm going to narrow it down to a few cards that I think might be your card. Now, I don't want you to give me any hints or clues to what your card is. So if you see your card in here, don't shout it out and say, that's my card, because obviously, that'll help me out. I'm going to go with this card. You're giving me nothing over there, Bob. Okay, I'm going to go with one last card, the Joker. Those are the cards I'm going with. So we've narrowed it down to a few cards here. Bob, do you see your card in here?
All right. I do, as a matter of fact.
I'm going to narrow it down to this card right here. Bob, how did I do?
You nailed it.
Is that it?
It is the 9 of Hearts.
Well, underneath my book, I had a prediction. I don't know if you saw my prediction earlier, but it says that looks like hepatitis B. Hold on. It says the 9 of Hearts.
Yes.
But not only that, it says this: before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely, O Lord, out of Psalm 139.
And there's the word. And there it is spelled out, Happy. There it is.
All right. Well, there's a little piece about what I do. Any word you wanted to, and it just appears there, Bob.
That's just amazing. Seeing my word actually translated there on the screen. Again, 3,000 miles away. That's pretty amazing.
Thank you.
I guess I don't get to ask you how you did it.
Yeah, I can't give away secrets.
No, you can't give away those secrets, but you can give away your website address if you would, please. Danny Ray joining us today here on the Meeting House on Faith Radio. What do you think?
Yeah, it's DannyRayMagic.com is the website.
All right. Very easy. DannyRayMagic.com. And Danny, hey, it has been a blast talking with you today here on the Meeting House on Faith Radio.
Thank you so much for having me, Bob. It's been a blast being with you, and stay happy. Hope your marriages are happy. Great word.
Thanks.